Hi Natalie, thank you for being here today. Would you like to tell the audience who you are and what you do, please?
I will, yeah. So I'm Natalie Hailey. My business is called Hot Content. And the best way I can describe what I do is help individuals and businesses make content happen. I think so many people that have a blog or create video content or have a podcast, it's very time consuming. It's a lot to keep up with to create that really quality content consistently. So I'm kind of like their outsourced content manager, if you like, that helps them with the creation, the production and the publishing of the content and the promotion of it.
Cool. So I know you've been doing your podcast for a while now. What was the reason for starting that?
Well, I never thought I would have a podcast, put it that way. I always viewed podcasts as really, really technical and only for people who knew everything, who were really techie. That's not me at all. But I could never remain consistent with blogging. It's strange because I write for my clients. I create blogs for clients. I'm always using words every single day in what I do. But for some reason, when it comes to writing a blog for my own business, I hate it. So I couldn't keep up with it. And I think that's the thing with content. If you don't enjoy doing it, you won't do it. You won't stick with it. So I just thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I think it was talking to Carl Gray, the podcast host, who basically just said it doesn't have to be technical. You can make things as simple as you want. Mm-hmm. So I think it was sort of over Christmas and the lead up to Christmas last year, I just thought, let's just look into it a little bit. And then by beginning of January, started the podcast and I've never looked back. I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's great. So who are your listeners? Is there a typical listener to Hot Content, or is it a broad spectrum?
I would say that they all create content in some way. They're usually solopreneurs or small business owners. I think the one thing that probably ties them all together is that they understand the importance of creating content, but need to get processes in place to help them produce that content better and with more consistency. So it's really about providing them with any advice, tips and tricks possible from the people who do it best to help them do that in their own business.
Yeah. So that's a fairly good answer to my next question, which is what value do you give them? Is there anything else that they get from your show or the guests that you have on?
Yeah, I would say that the guests that I have on are fairly varied. So I would say that they're all experts within their chosen field and they've all found a niche. So some people may specialize in using messenger bots for their marketing. So they're using that to promote their content. Other people have found really great processes which have helped them speed up the way that they create content. So they all have something to bring to the table in terms of helping people produce that content to a higher quality and to do it quicker and in a way that helps people fit it into their everyday lives, I would say. Yeah. And I think as well, in the other sense that it provides value is that people sharing their own experiences and sharing the struggles that they've had and how they overcome them helps the listeners realise that they're not alone in feeling overwhelmed by content creation. Mm-hmm. And you know, they can see how people have actually overcome these things in real life and help hopefully implement the advice that they've been given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's massive, isn't it? Especially for solopreneurs, and if you work from home like I do, it's mm-hmm. nice to know that there are other people who know how you're feeling and have gone through it. And I think that, as much as anything, having that reassurance must be massive for
yeah, because it's so easy. We've all been through it, and we all still do go through it. It's so easy to feel like this is not getting us anywhere, and should we just give up? So it's so important to talk to other people who are creating content, but people who have actually had real success with it, because it just reinforces the fact that if you continue to do something at a high level and a good level of quality consistently and over the long term, eventually you will start to gain traction. So it's having that constant reminder of what's possible, I think.
Yeah. So how would you say your podcast helps you stand out compared to other people who do the same or similar to you?
Yeah, I think podcasts are still less common. They are obviously becoming much more popular, and many more people and businesses are creating audio content. But I still think in comparison to blogs, it's much less common. So there is, just from that point of view, much more of an opportunity to differentiate from the competition and stand out. I also think that you may get fewer podcast listeners than, say, people who read your blog post, potentially. But I always think that those people who listen to a podcast are of more value. It's a much more intimate experience listening to a podcast. You physically got, somebody's voice plugged into your ears, coming straight through. And I think once you take to somebody's voice and once you take to their content, you form a much deeper kind of relationship connection almost. So I think there's much more opportunity to create deeper relationships with more potential through podcasts, definitely.
Yeah. So we were at Marketed Live earlier this year together, and there was that conversation about how podcasts are still very new compared to the United States. And I guess people would probably say, well, you work in marketing and with digital and content marketing, so you would be keen to have a podcast. Do you think that if people are in a less obviously, promotional kind of industry, that a podcast can be of value to them?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I've thought about this before, and I can think of very few industries or niches where a podcast wouldn't be of some value to a group of people out there. And I think it's becoming much more widespread in that, I can't think of anything completely random now off the top of my head, but if you think of something, a fairly random niche, you can almost guarantee there is at least one podcast that's being developed around that particular theme or topic. So yeah, I think really it's providing value in just the same way that a blog provides value. So if it's relevant for any type of company in any industry to have a blog, then I can't see why it wouldn't in a podcast. It's just a different way of communicating that particular message. I think it's much more obviously everybody prefers to consume content in different ways, and obviously it depends on your lifestyle and your personality. But I just think in this busy lives we're all living, it's much easier to fit listening to a podcast into your everyday schedule, I find. If you're on the school run, listening in the car, if you're going out for a run or out for a walk, it's much easier to kind of fit it in. So I'm all for them.
Good. And have you seen any benefits to your business, either directly or indirectly, since you've been doing your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. What I would say is that I suppose because part of what I do is help other companies create content, you almost have to lead by example. Yeah. So when I was doing the blog, I wasn't leading by example because I was sporadically, producing a blog post. Whereas showing your clients and potential clients that you yourself are producing quality content consistently every single fortnight stands you in good stead, and I think attracts people to you because they see it's possible, and it's great that you're leading by example. Also, I've had people just sort of seem to mention it in conversation, so I can tell that it's almost, my podcast kind of works as my marketing in a way. Yep. It's what seems to get me noticed almost, and I think because of some of the work that I do is for people that have a podcast, showing that I also have a podcast and understand implicitly everything that's involved in that.
Yep.
In that way as well. So I think if I was to sum up, I would say in general, it gives you a level of credibility, really. Yeah, such in good stead in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think credibility and showing that you're an expert in what you say you do is massive, isn't it? We talk about this all the time, and that's got to be a good enough reason as any to do this.
Absolutely. And it's just great content to share. And there's so many different things you can do with a podcast. You can repurpose them in so many different ways. I think that's what excites me about podcasts. You can do audiograms, you can share snippets of it on social media, you can turn them into, you've got your show notes, you can create a full blog post. Yourself, there's so much you can do with them. So people don't need to struggle thinking, I need to create more and more content. When you've got podcast, you've got so much there from one raw interview. You can do so much with it, just so much potential.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I don't have any more questions, but thank you. That was really, really useful, and it's nice to hear about your experience and what your audience is getting from it. So, if anybody wants to listen to your podcast or find out more about you, where should they be going?
They can listen to it on my website, which is hotcontent.co.uk, or it's on iTunes. If you just type in the Hot Content Marketing Podcast, you can find it there.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for your time today, and I will speak to you soon.
Thanks, Gudrun.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.